Imagine that you're at a theme park with your 4-year-old child. The two of you just stepped off the tilt-a-whirl and you're feeling dizzy and giddy, and you reach into your pocket to get some more tickets. As you do, your child's hand slips from your own. And then in an instant, your child is gone. You scan the park, you shout your child's name, you see colorful lights, greasy food carts, tantruming children, but no child. He's vanished. So your breathing starts to speed up, and your heart starts to pound, and your stomach drops. Your brain runs through the horrible things that could have happened to your child. You've lost control of the situation. And then suddenly, you look across the park, and there's your child. Your mind and your body immediately begin to settle. You regain control of the situation. Many of us have been through at least one highly anxious experience in our lives. But then the situation resolves, or we figure out how to manage that situation, and our anxiety abates. The mind and body recalibrate, we adjust. But what if there were no relief? What if you walked around every day with the feeling that your heart was pounding in your chest and that you couldn't breathe? What if your brain was constantly telling you that the scariest, most horrible things were going to happen, and that the world felt like an out-of-control and unsafe place? Now imagine that you're 7, or 10, or 15, and that this is your daily reality. This is what we need to understand about anxiety and what it's like to experience it. The word anxiety has become so overused, everyone has it, right? That the word no longer seems to capture how debilitating it can be when it reaches a level of clinical diagnosis. And I should be clear, worries and fears are a normal part of childhood development, and many children go through phases where they fear the dark, monsters, thunderstorms, even automatic flushing toilets that used to get me as a child. And stress is everywhere. In a recent survey of about 750 youth, nearly 8 in 10 reported experiencing stress on a daily basis. But what I'm talking about is something very different. Anxiety becomes diagnosable when it's extreme and it gets in the way of living a normal life. If a child is up night after night ruminating, if that child experiences chronic stomach aches and headaches and avoids people or places or things, that child could receive an anxiety diagnosis and needs treatment. As you can see from the red line in the graph, anxiety is the most common psychiatric disorder across development, as compared to behavioral, mood, and substance use disorders. And if you look across the bottom of the graph, you can see that rates of anxiety increase across development. Epidemiologic data tell us that 13 to 20% of children and adolescents meet criteria for an anxiety disorder in the US. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, 80% of these children are not receiving treatment. So let me say that again. That's nearly 1 in 5 children who are struggling to learn, to interact, and to enjoy life because of an anxiety disorder, and 80% of them are not receiving treatment. Sadly, even fewer children are receiving treatments that have been supported by research. Without appropriate treatment, anxiety tends to persist into adulthood. And this, of course, matters because anxiety is destructive to children's social, emotional, and academic functioning, and can be the gateway to other disorders, including depression, substance abuse, and behavioral problems. This places a massive toll on our children, our families, our educational system, and on our society. The story I'm going to tell today is about the debilitating nature of pediatric anxiety and our attempt to address this problem. It's also a story about building on best practices to develop outside-the-box solutions. Kim is a teenager who struggles from severe anxiety, and she gave me permission to tell her story. Kim had had an anxious temperament from the very beginning. She was the child in preschool who would grip her mother's leg at goodbye, and she was painfully shy. In the second grade, Kim was at a restaurant, and she witnessed a man cough up phlegm into his meal. 2 weeks after that, she developed a stomach virus and began to vomit uncontrollably. These two events triggered an overwhelming fear of vomiting. And you may be surprised at this example because nobody likes vomiting, right? But for Kim, this fear was all-consuming. And we've actually seen many children in our clinic whose anxiety began with this specific fear. For Kim, she started to have panic attacks when she went into public places where she thought she could get sick. And then she started to restrict her eating to avoid the possibility of vomiting. As the anxiety began to cascade, Kim pulled back. She stopped going to stores, then restaurants, and then she stopped going to school. When I met her, she was 14 and had been out of school for nearly 2 years. She was spending her days at home alone, essentially confined to her bedroom because of anxiety, while her mother was out working to support the family. She had become depressed, and she was so out of practice of interacting with other teenagers that she had developed social anxiety. Kim was hospitalized twice because of these symptoms, and she was actually put on a feeding tube. And she had been seeing her outpatient therapist on a weekly basis for years without much change. Kim's mother watched helplessly as her daughter became debilitated by fear and by sadness. So the question is, how can we help a child like Kim reclaim her life from anxiety? Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is currently the gold standard therapy for anxiety. Many of you have probably heard of CBT. It's a structured form of therapy that teaches people to manage their feelings by modifying their thoughts and their behaviors. The cornerstone of CBT is exposure. And that's the behavior part. Exposure essentially means facing one's fears in a gradual and structured manner to learn that that worst-case scenario fear likely doesn't happen, or that if it does, that it's manageable. CBT takes place in the office once a week for 50-minute sessions. This has been our standard of care for 50 years, and it works for many kids. But for children like Kim, with more severe and entrenched anxiety, it can be extremely difficult to gain traction in weekly 50-minute sessions in the office. In fact, research indicates that nearly half of children and adolescents who participate in weekly CBT for anxiety do not get better. Over the years, my colleagues and I have seen many children like Kim who've been in weekly CBT for months and even years, and they're still stuck. The longer these children are stuck, the farther they fall off the developmental curve, and the harder it is for them to get back on track. These children are not failing treatment. Our best treatments are failing them. So my colleagues and I broke from tradition. 3 years ago, with the support of McLean Hospital, we developed an intensive group-based program for children and adolescents with anxiety called the McLean Anxiety Mastery Program, or MAMP. In designing the program, we increased the length of CBT sessions, we increased the frequency of these sessions, and we increased the number of CBT sessions that were taking place outside the office in the community so that children could engage with their real-life fears. At MAMP, children participate in treatment 4 afternoons a week for 2.5 hours at a time, largely out in the community. They also participate in weekly family work and medication consultation sessions. And in the course of a month of treatment at MAMP, children receive nearly a year's worth of weekly outpatient therapy. So what does this look like in practice? Well, I'll tell you what it looked like for Kim. After being housebound for 2 years, Kim was literally unable to enter the clinic. So we met her in the car. And with daily support in the family's Toyota, Kim gradually learned how to tolerate her panic symptoms, and she built the confidence and the trust to start engaging in treatment in a meaningful way. And I can remember the day that Kim decided she was ready to leave the car. She came inside the building and she joined group. A seemingly small step, but for Kim, this was a huge exposure. Her whole face was red, her body was trembling, and she was hyperventilating, but she did it. Once Kim was engaged in our daily CBT skills group, she gained the skills and the strategies to start managing her extreme anxiety. For example, she learned how to use relaxation strategies to calm her body at night, and she learned to use mindfulness to stay more present during the day. Kim also gained the practice of interacting with other children in group, which was a powerful experience for someone who had been so socially isolated. Kim's family was also involved in treatment. Her mother had daily contact with the treatment team, and over time, she learned to step back as her daughter was struggling with anxiety, rather than to reach in and protect. And Kim met weekly with a program psychiatrist for medication consultation sessions. The foundation of Kim's treatment was exposure. We exposed her to Harvard Square. The noise, the traffic, the people. Can you imagine what this would be like after being housebound for 2 years? We rode on buses and subways, we went to stores and restaurants, and Kim ventured farther and farther out of her comfort zone each day. And finally, Kim was ready to face her big fear. We exposed her to vomit. And yes, I spared you that slide. We made a fake vomit mixture that Kim looked at and smelled and ran her hands through. And then one day, Kim was exiting the subway after an exposure, and she started to feel a little queasy. And then she threw up all over her feet. For Kim, this was a pivotal moment in treatment. She faced that worst-case scenario fear, and she saw that she could handle it. With this type of daily, intensive support, Kim was finally able to get unstuck. The team and I credit the intensity and the flexibility of the treatment model in helping Kim reclaim her life in about 6 weeks' time. Had we tried to treat her once a week for 50-minute sessions in the office, I honestly don't know where she'd be today. So where is Kim now, 2 years later? Kim is back in school, and she's attending on a daily basis. She's taking honors classes, and she has a job as a cashier at a local store. Her mom even emailed me last week to tell me that she had won a regional science fair. Kim is now going to museums, to hockey games, to stores and restaurants. She still has bouts of anxiety, but she doesn't let them hold her back from living a full life. And I think what strikes me the most is that Kim is now allowing herself to appreciate the smaller, more subtle things that truly make a meaningful life. Recently, she was in the car with her mom, and they were listening to the car radio, and she said, "I'm not sure if the songs are better now than they used to be, or if I'm just able to appreciate them more." So do we have this figured out? Not yet. Our own research at MAMP shows that kids do experience significant improvement over the course of treatment, but we don't yet know the optimal dose of treatment or whether it varies by anxiety disorder. We have a lot more to learn and more work to do, but at least we have some renewed hope for children like Kim. And now as an audience, you're probably waiting to hear your takeaway. I, of course, want you to better understand the challenges that children with anxiety face and this new model of treatment. But I also want to ask you to consider breaking from tradition when facing a serious problem or a challenge in your workplace, wherever that may be. Get together with colleagues and build on best practices by developing a new model and testing it. Even if it's messy, and I mean fake vomit messy, or means risking failure. If it affects the life of just one student like Kim, it could make all the difference. Thank you.